Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we are talking about leaf tip damage that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. We're gonna talk about what causes it as well and how to prevent it and why we need to intervene in the first place. And I have the perfect candidate here. This is my Phalaenopsis gigabell, which smells delightful. If you want to see a spotlight on it, I just made one on my second channel. I'll link you to it down below in the description. Check it out. And as you can see, we are dealing with quite the weird damage here. Alright, so we're gonna start with the removal of this damage and then we're gonna talk about other things related to it. Before we do though, don't forget to give this video a like, it really helps it out. Why not subscribe? It is free and I post multiple times a week, and if you're feeling just a little bit extra, do consider further supporting this channel by using the affiliate links down below, getting some merch, becoming a member, or using the super thanks option down below in my video. I will start to make videos about the super thanks questions, like standalone videos. Stay tuned for that. If you wanted to leave a super thanks anyway, might as well ask me something because I will reply in a video. Right, so to remove this damage, obviously we need to cut it. So we can use either a pruners, either a scissors, because leaves are not that tough. They can be cut with scissors as well. Now I'm gonna use the scissors this time, although I never use it because this is quite a white leaf, right? So I want to make a clean cut. So what we want to do is go back and cut into good tissue, into green tissue. If you can see, my damage here has a dried part and some browning, but also it has some yellowing. That is an active infection that continues to go up from day to day. I want to cut way above, as it were, this yellow part, just so I make sure that I don't get any infection left on the leaf to continue this whole drama here. So I'm gonna cut at least ½ an inch or 1 centimeter below any discoloration that I can see. I think I'm gonna go 2 centimeters just to be extra careful. So because I want to make it a chevron, I'm doing this V shape, but obviously can just go ahead and cut everything if that's what you feel like, but there we go. So you can see I have no more damage left on the leaf. Now, what I further like to do is seal off this cut wound, because this happened due to some pathogens that I have in the air, and we all do in our area. So I don't want any pathogens to go back through this door that I just left open right now. So the easiest way to seal it, I find, is with cinnamon powder. Hold on, let me get it. All right, so this is cinnamon powder from the supermarket. It's the one you put in cakes. It's nothing special. And in my experience, it does seem to create a very nice seal on cut wounds. And statistically speaking, I did notice less reinfections of cut leaves ever since I started to use the cinnamon powder. There are other powders. I'm sure there are some powders on the market. Doesn't need to be cinnamon, but you know, everybody has cinnamon in the house, or at least most people, so you can use it. Now, if it has any other antifungal or antibacterial properties, I don't know. I'm not relying on that because I cannot really detect that, but it makes sense that it does create a seal with the environment. So the cinnamon will stick to the wet layer of the leaf here, and it will not let other stuff come in. In time, it's actually going to create like a crust. Cinnamon is ground bark, and once you get it a little bit wet, it kind of dries in place and becomes just like a bark. So I'm creating the layer of bark on this leaf in a weird way. Alright, so what we can do now is just put this orchid back in the shelf. If you're gonna use this technique and you have the habit of maybe showering orchids, maybe you can do this safely. Maybe you're growing them outside. Lay off showering for a few days. Just let a layer of cells here die off, dry off, create that seal. And that can take a few days, maybe up to a week. So just keep the area as dry as possible until everything dries. So we're pretty much done. Easy, right? I know. Now let's just talk about why we needed to do this, why this happens, all of that fun stuff, because this is actually preventable, at least to some extent. Alright, so why did we have to intervene? Why did we have to cut this part? Well, simple answer is because it was spreading. When growing orchids across the board, we have a rule, or at least I have a rule, when it comes to spots and damage on the leaves. If it spreads, it needs addressing. If it doesn't spread, it's benign and it can be left alone. I'll show you an example. In our case, this was spreading, which means it is an active infection. So I kept an eye on my orchid for about a month, and it took about a month for this to happen and for this damage to advance upwards on the leaf. And not only does it spread, but also it looks very suspicious. Let me give you a close-up. So do we see that on top of the browning, which is just dead tissue, we have a yellow layer, and not only that, some green discolored layer as well. Yes, that is the pathogens or microbes that are damaging the tissue slowly and surely. Usually when we have damage accompanied by this halo, it means we have an active infection which spreads. And if it spreads, it can actually in time take over the entire leaf, and that's just a waste of a perfectly good solar panel. Leaves are very important for orchids, and I would like to keep them in good function. Now, yes, this leaf is shorter than it used to be, but at least it is out of danger, and it will continue to photosynthesize and produce food for this orchid. Not at full capacity, but at least it will still hang around for a few more years to provide nutrients for my orchid. And that is the point of intervening, just saving bits of leaves which can be savable just to continue helping the orchid. So now let me show you some damage which doesn't really need addressing. Alright, here we go. Here I have an Oncidium type orchid. These guys have a lot of leaf tip dieback. But in our case here, do we see that we have the crunchy, dried part, and then the green part, there's no halo, there's no yellowing, there's nothing in between. Well, this damage has been here ever since I purchased this orchid, which was, I don't even know if this year, maybe at the beginning of the year. So it's been about 6 months and nothing advanced. In this case, we absolutely do not need to intervene. We don't need to cut anything if we don't feel like it. For aesthetic reasons, we can cut this damage, again, making the leaf maybe in a chevron shape or maybe at an angle like this. Even in this case, it is a good idea to put that cinnamon powder to create that barrier because we are opening up the leaf to pathogens. This is one of the reasons why I typically don't remove this damage. I'm not that bothered. Sometimes I am, but many of the times I'm not. And I just don't want to open a door for pathogens when there is no real need to other than aesthetics. Depends. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, but there's no intervention needed here unless you just really don't like the look. So now that we know why we need to intervene, let's talk about how do we prevent this from happening. And well, it is pretty easy, but we have to know why this happens in the first place. So in order to have an infection on a leaf, we have to have a broken barrier. Now, barrier is a friendly word for cuticle. The cuticle is that layer of the leaf that protects it, amongst other things, from pathogens. Pretty much, if we have a big enough tear in the leaf or a split in the leaf or a cut like we just did, we have an open door for pathogens. And this happens a lot with Phalaenopsis that have long leaves. This is a Gigantea hybrid, and I noticed both with this one and the other one, we are prone to having this damage because the leaves, many of the times, touch the table. And this creates pressure at the tip, and it's really easy for the tip to just split slightly right here at the very end. Now, there are other Phalaenopsis which can do that as well. Split leaves usually happen due to some sort of dehydration or tension here, and some of you might have experienced it. Well, with these orchids, it happens due to the fact that they touch the shelf. So ever since I noticed this kind of feature of these two orchids, I keep them on razors and I stopped having issues. Do you see? So in this case, the solution is easy. Just keep the orchid raised because it's that type of orchid. In other situations, it's important to keep orchids hydrated, which I know sometimes in life can be harder. But if we don't hydrate our orchids in time and then water them and rehydrate them suddenly, we create some tension in the leaves, which can sometimes lead to split leaves. And the place they split at is here. It's the very end where the two sides of the leaves meet. So making sure your orchid stays hydrated is important as well. This is especially true with Phalaenopsis, but not only monopodials in general. Vandas, I've seen that happen a lot with, and everything related pretty much. In the case of Sympodials and Oncidiums, which are thirsty orchids, usually we don't get split leaves. I feel like the anatomy of these orchids is just a little bit different and we don't have all that much stress on the leaf tip here. It's just different somehow. But what we do have in this case is leaf tip dieback due to other more chemical processes, and not only happening in the leaves, which I will not get into. But another reason why we might get infections in the leaves are pests. And this one, you see, I hope you can see the grazing on the leaves. It has serious pest issues. Look at that. Pests, again, grazing on the leaves, break that cuticle, break that barrier, and they open a door for pathogens. And sometimes things like spider mites and thrips, that damage they create is oftentimes associated with a secondary infection. So in this case, I seriously need to address whatever's happening here because it's not good. But keeping your orchids pest free will keep them from having infections on their leaves as well. So from here we can extrapolate to other instances. If you snap by mistake a leaf, you might get an infection there. If mechanical damage happens to your leaves, maybe your cat grazes a little bit on the leaves, that can get infected too. Imagine yourself, when you cut your finger, there is a chance you can get infected. Will you? Not all the times, obviously. Maybe most of the times you won't, but the chance is there, right? Sometimes 1 in 50 cuts will get infected. So in case that happens, there isn't a cream we can apply, we just need to get rid of that tissue. If the tissue is in the middle of the leaf, we kind of need to cut under it. If it's right here at the base, then the leaf is compromised. But most of the times it's either at the end of the leaf or somewhere in the middle. So we can just cut under it and poof, the problem is solved. Now, leaf tip dieback, as I was saying, can be not so dangerous, and things like not watering often enough or using too much fertilizer can create some dried leaf tips. And actually, the American Orchid Society does have a free article you can read. I'll link it to it down below so you learn how that works. But the most important thing to remember is if it spreads, it needs to go away. If it has a yellow halo, most probably it spreads. If it doesn't spread, it can stay there. If it bothers you visually, you can remove it, but other than that, it doesn't bother the orchid. I have some orchids with mechanical damage that happen on transport, or who knows. Look at this. This orchid has 2 holes in its leaf. Let me get you in closer. Do you see? But do you also see there is no yellow halo, nothing weird going on there? Yeah. It's absolutely fine. Mechanical damage can happen. It doesn't mean it's gonna get infected. So in this case, I don't need to intervene, don't need to do anything. And most likely, now that the orchid sealed off the tissue, nothing bad will happen in the future either. Once a part of the tissue is dried, nothing can enter the doors, which is why we're applying cinnamon here as well, just to create that barrier until the tissue dries. Yeah, so it really doesn't matter what type of damage you have on your orchid, you know the rule now. Alrighty, I think I will actually make a very short version of this video for the second channel, maybe just with how to address this issue, but without other explanations, because I know some people really like that short format, no explanation needed, might as well give you good tips, right? And speaking of which, if you want to check out my second channel, I'll link you to it down below in the description, but most importantly, do subscribe to this channel because this is where I post the good stuff and the serious collector stuff. Alrighty, so that said, I hope you have a great day and I'll see you next time. Bye!